What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 142.
142.
On this Monday, January 6th, 2025. First Monday of 2025. It's a cold one. Freezing temps outside right now. In Oklahoma, so everybody staying warm. Josh Callaway, James D. Jackson, Tom Green here with you on a Monday. Oklahoma, a couple of big splash additions in the transfer portal over the last 24 hours. We will, of course, discuss that as well as start our position status report series. We did this last year, too. We're going to go through the roster one position at a time, give a little temperature check. We're starting with quarterbacks today. Some other football headlines to discuss as well, along with basketball recap after the start of SEC play for both men's and women's hoops. So a nice Monday show here to get you started on the first full week of January. But, gentlemen, let's start with the transfer portal. As is normally the case around this time of year. You know, I did the show with Colin last Thursday, and we talked about it. The first 12 transfer additions that Oklahoma had made in this portal cycle, not one of them on defense. But that has since been changed. A couple of names that we brought up last Thursday with Colin have both jumped into the boat. We'll start with Marvin Jones Jr. from Florida State, defensive end. He officially signed with Oklahoma today on Monday. Guys, obviously, this feels like a huge get. I mean, John Mateer is always going to be your crown jewel of this portal class. That's not going to change. But it feels like after him, you could argue this is the next best guy with Marvin Jones coming in. It's a former five-star prospect. Obviously, had some really flashes of brilliance with Florida State over the last few years. This past season, productive. I think he had 4 sacks. Goes to a room that's losing some key guys, some veteran guys that are moving on. What do you guys make of the pickup here? Feels like a room that needed another body. They didn't just get another body, but they got another impact body in Marvin Jones Jr. Big splash get here for this Oklahoma defense.
Yeah, you mentioned that the first 12 transfer pickups were all on offense. And, I think it's telling. You look back to what Brent Venables said. I think it was the day before the Armed Forces Bowl. He was talking about the transfer portal. He's like, we don't have many needs. We have tremendous retention on the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's telling that, look, they're being very selective in what they want to bring in defensively because of what they are bringing back and how good the defense was this year. So for Marvin Jones Jr. to be the first one, I think it's telling as to, how they kind of view him and his skill set and what he's capable of. Obviously, like you mentioned, a former 5-star prospect in the 2022 class, considered Oklahoma out of high school before ending up at Georgia for a couple of years, and then spending this last year at Florida State, where his dad was, an All-American, Lombardi winner, Butkus winner. I think he was a first-round NFL draft pick, 10-year in the NFL, College Football Hall of Famer, and all that stuff. But I like this pickup because you look at what Oklahoma brings back on the defensive line. Presumably right now you're bringing back R. Mason Thomas. You're bringing back Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson, Grayson Halton, and then, depth pieces behind those guys that are still like younger coming along. But you're bringing back 4 of your top 5 defensive linemen in terms of snaps played from this past season. And I just think that Marvin Jones Jr. has a chance to be a real nice complementary piece on the other edge from R. Mason Thomas to sandwich between, Dominic Williams and Jaden Jackson. I think that's going to work out really well for them.
The best pass defense is a great pass rush. And at the time, just gave off those names. You see the kind of defensive line Oklahoma is going to have going into this season, especially if R. Mason Thomas decides to come back as well. So, this is a really, really big pickup, and one that could be it could change the dynamics of this defense. I know we were expecting this defense to be really good, but this could make them, be elite. A guy like that has that experience, that had the production, and has played at this, type of level to come in and just help this team out. You look at guys like Dominic Williams, Jaden Jackson. Those guys are really coming into their own, and some of those guys that are trying to get to the NFL down the line, having that experience on this defensive line is just great because you talked about losing guys like Trace Ford and Ethan Downs, even guys like that. You had to replace them, and you were expecting some splash, and you got it here. I mean, this is a really, really good guy to get. He's still a 4-star guy, even after being a 5-star as a recruit. He's a 4-star as a transfer, so it just shows that he hasn't dropped off much from what his initial potential was. He still could be a really, really good player, and I think that's what he is coming into Oklahoma.
Yeah, ton of upside. It feels like even if R. Mason is back, which we said it over and over, sounds positive. We're still waiting for the official word there. That's kind of the last big fish hanging out there as far as a retention standpoint. But even if R. Mason's back, and even if, one of these other younger guys steps up, PJ Adebawore in year 3, or Danny Okoye, or Wyatt Gilmore, Taylor Wine, any of these guys who you're looking to maybe have a breakout, you're still losing Ethan Downs, Trace Ford, and Caden Woolard, who all were really solid veterans for you. Obviously, Ethan Downs, one of the best players on your defense. So even if all that were to go to plan, you needed another guy. And not only did you get another guy, but you got a premier guy, one of the best edge rushers in the portal, one of the best players, period, available still in the portal in Marvin Jones. So I love the pickup. There was some thought, is he going to be a personality fit, for this Oklahoma team? Something that Brent Venables has done really well since he's been here, pretty much unanimously from my view, is finding the right guys to fit into kind of their culture. I'm impressed. Every time we talk to a new guy for the first time, it always like, oh, I see, this is a Brent Venables guy. Like, you can tell every time. So if they're bringing him in, I have very little concerns in that area. And yeah, it just seems like a great get in a lot of ways. And one that when the season goes on, we could look back as one of the most significant gets that they got, certainly in this portal cycle. So big get here with Marvin Jones Jr. And he comes in on the defensive edge. And we talked about it, the linebacker room, another one that probably could have used a guy. And that's where they also made an addition. So they went with Oklahoma State's Kendal Daniels, another, again, high upside guy who was a very highly touted recruit out of high school. James, you covered him in high school. He's an in-state kid at Beggs. He comes over from Oklahoma State. We talked about it. They needed a linebacker. Lewis Carter moved on. Obviously, just saw McCullough hit the portal as well. Danny Stutzman, obviously, off to the NFL. That room had gotten a little thin suddenly. It feels like Kendal Daniels comes in. He's a natural potential cheetah option for you as well. Really, really productive tackler 2 years ago. Had over 100 tackles in 2023. Guys, what do you make of this pickup? As it feels like just he helps you in a lot of ways. Very versatile addition here. And like Marvin Jones, a lot of upside and could really be a big-time player on this defense, immediately, obviously, next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the versatility part. You can play kind of linebacker safety, which is essentially what that hybrid cheetah role is. Mm-hmm. He played a decent amount in the slot this season, but most of his snaps came in the box at Oklahoma State. He's been very productive, certainly the last 2 years, 105 tackles last year, 5.5 for loss, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions during that 2023 season. Numbers kind of took a step back this season. His productivity overall kind of fell off. He had 64 total tackles, but he doubled his tackles for loss, basically 10.5, had 5.5 sacks. He led Oklahoma State in tackles for loss. Certainly they didn't have the season they wanted. He probably didn't have the season he wanted, but I still think he's a very talented and versatile player who can, like you said, plug a few roles that you need, especially in that linebacker room. Even though you're bringing back Kendel Dolby, you're losing a Deshaun McCullough, you're losing Lewis Carter, you're losing Danny Stutzman. You needed some depth beyond just Kendel Dolby at Cheetah, Kobe McKenzie and Kip Lewis. You needed guys that have some experience to help round out that rotation. I think that's what they're getting right now in Kendal Daniels.
This guy is a pure athlete. I mean, he's one of those players that he was a basketball player growing up, and his high school coach convinced him to play football in his sophomore season, and it just immediately just shot up. I mean, it's incredible the type of athlete that he is, because you saw him go from the top safety in the state, which he became the number one overall player in the state at that position, to then switch to linebacker in college and still have a productive season and be great at his spot. So it's like it's a great situation for OU to get a guy like that they can be versatile and they can come play that cheetah position. If maybe Kendel Dolby isn't all the way there, all the way back yet early on, you have that guy and he can be, a glue piece as well. So it's like, it's really, really good. I mean, he wanted to go to OU originally. I had that story up on Sooners Illustrated if you want to check that out. And there's some things that happen there, but it's great. It's great to get a guy like that to OU and to Norman. Yeah,
it scratches 2 itches for you. James has brought up one. Kendel Dolby, obviously, we're going to talk about it later, is coming back next year, and you're excited for him to presumably step back into that cheetah role. But he's coming off a major injury, right? I mean, so gives him a little more time in a security blanket if he's not fully backed himself when the season starts. You have another guy who could certainly fit into that cheetah role. And then conversely, going back to the linebacker conversation, we talked about Samuel Masigo being a potential cheetah as well, played it this year and did a nice job. But if you have Kendal Daniels, maybe now you consider just kicking Samuel Masigo to a full-time linebacker again and maybe getting him, out on the field with Kip Lewis or with Kobe McKenzie, however you want to balance that out. Or even if you like Samuel Masigo at Cheetah, you let Kendal Daniels play some linebacker. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can kind of play around with this. So, one guy checking off this many boxes for you is always going to be a nice get in the portal. And that's what Kendal Daniels does. So a lot of flexibility and a lot of kind of needs addressed in one swoop in a way with Kendall Daniels. So a nice pickup here. And Oklahoma, getting aggressive. Nice little trend on the portal. This is all without a DC, making a couple of big defensive additions. We'll see what else they can do. Colin, I talked about last week, still maybe would like a cornerback. Maybe we'll see. But these are two big needs I feel like that they've addressed here in the last 24 hours. So good stuff and a lot to like. As far as elsewhere on the roster, so we did this last year whenever the calendar flipped to January, we got into the winter, kind of in this middle gap between winter and spring. We started doing our position status reports where we kind of went through the positions one at a time. We kind of did a little temperature check. The portal cycle's winding down. Now, there will be more additions and stuff, so some of this is a little fluid, but as it stands today and how we feel that room is progressing relative to where it was the season we just had. So let's start with quarterbacks. Let's start right at the top with quarterbacks. I feel like it's safe to talk about this position. I don't think there's going to be any more shakeups here. You wouldn't think.
Yeah.
So you bring in the number one player in the portal, John Mateer, presumably going to be your starting quarterback. Michael Hawkins back for his second season. We talked about it. You added Cole Gonzalez from Western Carolina into the fold there as well. You needed to do that because you lost basically everything else in the portal with Brendan Zerber moving on. Obviously, Jackson Arnold, Steele Wassel, Casey Thompson graduated. Mm-hmm. How do you guys kind of surmise this quarterback room right now? And again, relative to where it was last year. And, it's hard because you went into the year with so much expectations for what Jackson Arnold was going to be. Didn't go the way anybody planned. But you loop in the fact that you have Ben Arbuckle this time around, the relationship with John Mateer. How do you guys kind of lay out this quarterback room this season? And do you feel like Oklahoma has improved upon it, about the same, or, more questions? How do you kind of feel about their position in general relative to a year ago?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's, very similar situation to a year ago where you're bringing back just one guy from the room from the previous year. In this case, it's Michael Hawkins instead of Jackson Arnold being the one carryover. Mm-hmm. And I know we all had high expectations for Jackson Arnold that obviously didn't pan out. But I think you have to feel better about the quarterback room going into 25 than you did coming out of 2024. For the simple fact that John Mateer has proven that he can do it. He's got just 1 year shorter, but he was one of the better quarterbacks in college football this season. You add in the Ben Arbuckle factor. You add in, the John Kuzienski factor, the other quarterbacks coach from Washington State, who's now an assistant quarterbacks coach on staff. There's a familiarity there, not just with the scheme, but with the coaching staff that he's working with. I think you feel really good. You look at Michael Hawkins, too. I think that we all left that Armed Forces Bowl pretty impressed with what his ceiling can be moving forward. And then adding another experienced piece in Cole Gonzalez, like we discussed, previously, it's like, if you want to leave the door open for Michael Hawkins to redshirt, you have a guy that you can plug in there in, garbage time or in a pinch if you just need him to go burn a couple series or whatever, without having to worry about risking a year of eligibility for Michael Hawkins if that's the path they decide to go down. So I think going into 2025 at this point, you feel a lot better about the quarterback situation than you did coming out of last year. And it's not just because of John Mateer, but he is certainly a major, major reason for it.
Sure. Yeah, and we don't want to forget about Jet either. I mean, we don't expect him to play this season, but
good.
Signed from. So basically, I think, as Tom said, I guess I kind of do feel a little bit better about this quarterback situation because John Mateer proved that he's already done it. He can do it. And then we saw a lot of growth from Michael Hawkins over this season. Last year, we didn't know what he could be. We had no idea how good he could be. And we kind of got a glimpse of that this year and saw some really growth from him overall throughout the season. So it looks pretty good, I think, right now, because you also add Cole Gonzalez and things like that. If you want to, maybe redshirt Michael Hawkins, give him one more year to develop. Cole Gonzalez, he's a guy that can do that. I mean, based on the numbers that he put up at the FCS level, he can handle himself as well out there at quarterback. So I guess we do feel better because like the John Mateer, Ben Arbuckle system, they already know each other. They know exactly what they want to implement. It should all work out pretty well here. So that's pretty good for them.
Yeah, I don't know how you couldn't possibly feel better about the position going into next season. And again, that's relative. I mean, compared to this time last year, I mean, that's maybe harder to decide because, I mean, hand up, I'll admit, I thought Jackson Arnold was going to come in and light it up, but obviously it didn't work out that way. The OC situation is a part of it, but with the benefit of hindsight, the fact that John Mateer has got his OC, that's the biggest thing because, maybe who knows what happens if Jeff Lebby's still the OC this past season. That's a Pandora's box and a what if that we'll have to just That's what it'll just have to remain, a what if, because we'll never know. But that's a huge thing that cannot be overlooked, is that familiarity with your guy, your offense that you're familiar with and comfortable with. And John Mateer's got that. I mean, he's played under Ben Arbuckle, had a great season at Washington State. I think it's still fair to wonder how he'll translate to the SEC, playing against top competition. But I think it's also fair to think he's going to be good, with what he did with Ben, that familiarity. So, yeah, I feel great about John Mateer. I'm excited. And then you have a legitimate backup in Michael Hawkins, who you feel like could win games for you. If he was the guy, he could win games for you too. Cole Gonzalez, like we talked about, a very quality depth addition. Jet New, you got your young guy waiting in the wings maybe for down the road. It's a good room. And I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. So I don't know how you couldn't feel better about it compared to, obviously, this past year where you had the starting quarterback get benched twice. You know what I mean? So it's you're hoping that there'll be no benchings in 2025. That's the goal. No benchings for John Mateer. Any other thoughts on quarterbacks? It's a good room. It's a good room. And obviously John Mateer, the number one player in the portal. So that's a good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I think we got
making sure.
out. Yeah.
Making sure.
Yeah. Jet New, we didn't talk about Jet New at all, but he's, was Ben Arbuckle, wasn't he Ben Arbuckle's first offer and signee or commit?
He wasn't committed to Washington State, but he had recruited him.
Yeah.
So he knew him.
Yeah. But I mean, when he got to Oklahoma, it was.
Oh, yes.
Right? Yeah, his first
offered him and signed him. Yeah, it was like 2 days. Like he just got the job.
Yeah, so obviously some confidence in him, and we'll see what happens with him. But obviously that looks like something that Ben Arbuckle likes. So
for sure. Elsewhere on football front, a couple of those quick headline things wanted to make sure we mentioned on the show, just the kind of housekeeping things. Chuck Lillie left a few days ago. He's going to West Virginia. He was the assistant GM at Oklahoma. He goes to West Virginia. He's going to be the full-time GM there. Guys, any takeaways here? I mean, these kind of roles are always hard because it's like, what do they actually do on a day-to-day? And, it's not overly transparent. It's not overly clear what everyone's actual role is within the system. All you can really know is that Brent Venables trusted Chuck Lillie to help with the transfer portal, system, their process, however you want to term that, and how he is moving on after not being around that long, less than a calendar year. It's a job upgrade for him, obviously, to go be the full-time GM at West Virginia. Any takeaways or thoughts here?
Yeah, I think the one thing is when he left, people were like, because he was so involved in their transfer portal endeavors, it's like, okay, what's going to happen now? But it obviously has not slowed them down since they were able to, pick up guys like Kendall Daniels and Marvin Jones Jr. in the last, 24 hours. So they're still plugging along. They have a plan. They're doing some restructuring there. So, I mean, it makes sense to leave an assistant position for a full-time job where you're going to oversee like the whole, front office endeavor there at West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, you get a full-time job. Can't really blame the guy too much. You get there. Well, not full-time, but he's the actual title of is what I mean. But yeah, he's just it's a better role, I guess, in terms of that. So can't really blame him. Just good luck to him.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things too, because obviously fans look at the portal cycle. This is before these last two guys, especially, and I'm kind of like, is it that big a deal? Again, kind of what I said earlier. At the end of the day, it's a guy that Brent Venables trusted, and like you'd like some continuity, and there's nothing you can do about a guy taking a better job. But the kind of the chess pieces keep moving. It's not usually conducive to everything being smooth. So again, I don't want to overstate and say this is some massive deal, but it's not preferred. Not ideal. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens down the road. We'll see if Oklahoma makes any additions to kind of fill this void that Chuck Lillie leaves. Other football headline I want to mention, we kind of touched on it a little bit already, but Kendel Dolby's back for next season. I don't think there was really any question here that he would be, but it's always nice to get the official announcement. You never know. I mean, guys hit the portal and do surprising stuff all the time. Kendel Dolby had that, horrific injury back against Tennessee, was off to a great start to his season. You hope that if he's back healthy for the start of next year, he'll play a lot. I mean, obviously he would be a big part of this defense in that cheetah role, but good to get him back into the fold next year, guys, as a guy who, again, kind of joining a lot of these guys, was having a nice season again before he got hurt last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think back to, I think it was the Monday or Tuesday after that Tennessee game when we spoke to players, and we spoke to Billy Bowman, and he said, like, if I could have 100 Kendel Dolbys on my team, I'd take them. They're not going to have 100. They're going to have one. And if he comes back healthy, like, he was one of their best all-around defensive players this season before he got hurt. He was really rounding into that cheetah role. I know he started out at corner last year when he got to Oklahoma, and then kind of shifted, early in the season over to that cheetah role and really started to come into his own. And then, Brent Venables talked about how in the offseason, like he saw him kind of take that next step just from an off the field standpoint in terms of his preparation, in terms of his, film study and note taking and just attention to detail. And when you combine that attention to detail with the physical tools, you saw what Kendel Dolby was capable of in those, first 4 games before he got hurt. So getting him back, I think is just huge. It bolsters Oklahoma's defense that was, still really solid without him this season. And again, you talk about that cheater position. We know how important that position is in Brent Venables' defense, and Kendel Dolby's a guy that's proven that he can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about change a lot in Brent Venables' staff, even with Zach Alley leaving and things like that. The defense is going to be pretty similar in terms of how they call things because you expect Brent Venables to have his hand in there. So having a guy like Kendel Dolby back that knows that system, that has played it at a high level and does it really well, it's insurmountable. I mean, it's insurmountable. Like it's really good to get a guy like that. And Tom talked about it. He was off and running this year. I mean, making that position switch. Brent Venables talked about it. He plays bigger than he really is, and that just helped out a lot because of his confidence and things like that on the field. And just having a guy that knows where to be, knows what to do, it's great, especially in the SEC when things are pretty tough and it can happen on the blink of an eye in different plays like that. So pretty good for them.
All eyes on Mason Thomas now. He's really the last kind of big fish hanging out there. He's teasing everyone. Trolling Greece. Are you guys up on your Greece? I didn't get the reference. I have to admit.
I was hoping you guys knew that.
I think
I've seen Greece several times, but like I don't entirely know what he was getting at.
Relative to
yeah.
He's the last one hanging out there. But and again, it sounds positive. We'll see. Things look good, but Mason back or not, this defense can be good. If Oklahoma's 2025 season isn't any better than this last one, it will not be because of the defense. I feel very confident in saying that. On paper, this is a stacked roster, even with losing Danny and Billy Bowman and Ethan Downs, amongst some other guys. It's just you look at up and down, and you're just saying this is a really, really nice roster on paper because retention has been great. I mean, Kip Lewis. Dominic Williams back. Obviously, we talked about Robert Spears-Jennings back. So, I mean, it's just
Jaden Jackson back.
I mean, they've stepped up and done what they need to do to keep these big-name guys in their defense. And then they added a couple guys we just talked about. So this defense is going to be good. And that's something that's exciting for Oklahoma fans. You can talk yourself into all offseason. Like, I don't know if structurally it's where it needs to be. I don't know if the offense is going to be fixed, but the defense is going to be good. That's not part of the problem. That's bottom on your worry list right now if you're an OU fan. Mm-hmm. Should we do a little basketball? SEC play has opened up for men's and women's hoops. Porter Moser and Jenny Bronchek squads, which are off to great starts in the non-con, obviously. And now they step into the SEC, which is just a loaded basketball conference now. Figures right as the two teams make the transition. It's always been pretty good women's hoops, but men's hoops has just been the steady climb to where it's just legitimately the best conference in America now. We'll start with the men, and then we'll end on the positive note with the women yesterday. Tom, you were in Tuscaloosa for the SEC opener on Saturday. Didn't go well. Did not go well at all. Oklahoma got blown out by Alabama. Basically, every fear that you had or worry about Oklahoma came to its realization, if that is proper, grammar there. On Saturday, it was kind of like all their flaws got exposed in the worst way. Most points they allowed in the Porter Moser era by a lot. You were there. I guess the question Oklahoma fans are going to have here, how much of this can be written off to it's Alabama, they're really good on the road, and how much of it is, okay, panic, this team is going to have some serious problems and issues in SEC play. How do you kind of glean through that from this, again, one game, but a bad game?
Yeah, man, I don't think it's time to panic by any means. Like, it's still just your first loss of the season. And keep in mind, like, we all knew coming into the season that SEC opener was going to be brutal. Alabama was a Final Four team last season. They bring back a lot of those players, namely, Mark Sears and Grant Nelson. They got a really good freshman in LeBaron Philon. They added a really good transfer guard from Auburn and Aiden Holloway. And they just got a lot of size. Like, they start 3 guys that are 6'11", And they got another guy off the bench. I think that's 6'10", another one that's 6'8". Like they're a long team, and look, they won't be the last one that Oklahoma faces like that in the SEC. And I think that is where Oklahoma is going to have a hard time against teams like Alabama, against teams like Auburn that have that length. And I think that's the biggest concern because, you're not going to magically add 7-footers overnight if you're Oklahoma. But I asked Porter Moser about that after the game, and he's like, it's about like effort on the boards and just like getting a body on guys and getting on their legs and just boxing them out. And you didn't see that effort from Oklahoma against Alabama. They looked a little bit flustered by the size. I think it's a learning experience up and down the roster. Sam Godwin, he was their, best player in that first half. He had 11 points. He had a basket taken off due to, a review for basket interference. But for him to be their most effective guy when they're going up against that kind of size, I think is a little bit of a positive sign you can take from it. Some of the other guys got going a little bit more in the second half. Jeremiah Fears, I think it really was a learning experience for him. He started the game 0 of 8 from the field, 0 of 7 in the first half. His only point was he split a pair of free throws. He still finished with, I think it was 16 points. Had a decent game overall, but defensively he struggled a little bit against Alabama's guards, namely Mark Sears. Like, you're going up against an All-American veteran guy like that. It is going to be a tough go. So I think that one was a little bit of a learning experience. And Porter Moser said, what he can take away from it is that, hey, if your shot's not falling, you're so good at so many other things. Like, don't let the shots affect how you play the rest of your game defensively, getting teammates involved, being engaged. And, he said, Jeremiah wasn't pouting per se, but you could tell that it was like the rough start was getting to him.
Sure.
I think he finally came along a little bit late. And again, Alabama was playing very physical. That length was giving them some trouble, but I don't think by any means it's, time to panic. We all knew the SEC season is going to be difficult. Like, they still have 13 or 12 quad one opportunities ahead of them over the next 17 games. That is plenty of opportunity to continue to build your resume. One of their quad 2 games from non-conference play just moved over quad 1. I know all of that is fluid over the next 2 months, but you're still 3-1 in quad 1 games. You're still, feeling really good. You're ranked 17th, fell a little bit in the AP poll. But you got to learn from the loss and not let it snowball. So we'll see.
For sure. I think, everyone went in, expecting this was going to be a tough one to get in Tuscaloosa. You certainly would have liked to have been more competitive, though. And we'll see where they go from here. Like you said, the key, and I talked about this a lot last year in the Big 12, and it certainly applies again this time around through the SEC. You're going to lose games, okay? The conference is way too good. These road environments are insane, and there's too many good teams. You're going to lose games. You have to find a way to not let it, like Tom said, snowball on you and let 1 or 2 losses turn into 4 or 5, because that's what will sink you, come Selection Sunday. You look at this week, here you go, right? You got Texas A&M coming in Norman on Wednesday. They're number 10 in the AP poll today. So another top 10 team, again, this time in Norman. And it's like, okay, a chance to get right back on track. Whereas if you lose this one, now it's like, okay, you have to go to Athens on Saturday against a Georgia team that's playing pretty well so far this season. It's like now you're kind of stuck in a spot where if you don't win on the road, you're 0-3. Like, you see how it can kind of get away from you kind of quickly if you don't get it back on track. So big game on Wednesday with Texas A&M. I'm not smashing the panic button yet. It's one game, but you're cautious now. You are, because it went so poorly. So on Wednesday, like, you hate to put too much emphasis on a game in January, early January at that, but like, they need a good game on Wednesday. They need to play well and probably win.
Yeah. Look, you need to have better effort and just consistency inside. Like, they got hammered on the boards. Alabama had more offensive rebounds than Oklahoma had defensive rebounds. That's never ideal. They got hammered in the paint. They shot at a decent clip. I think they still made like 48% of their shots for the game. But, Jeremiah Fears struggled early on. Duke Miles struggled to get going too. You got absolutely nothing from the bench. You got 5 points from the bench, which is a season low. Bench made just like 2 of 6 shot attempts. and you're not going to see that every night. I don't think. That's why I don't think it's a concern. The bench has been pretty solid this season. Rebounding has been an issue, but again, it's a want-to thing when you don't have the size, and like Oklahoma needs to show that it wants to. And look, credit to Sam Godwin, he was really battling down there, despite giving up a lot of length to Alabama's front court. But they need that up and down the lineup from guys.
For sure. Jalen Moore, so good. He was really the one guy who played pretty well the whole time. We'll see how they bounce back. Wednesday, very important. Texas A&M and Norman. Tom and I will be there at the LNC. James asked for the women. Really good win yesterday. To get back on track, they knocked off previously undefeated Tennessee in Knoxville yesterday afternoon after they dropped their SEC opener on Thursday against Texas. You and I were in Norman for that one. Had that great first quarter where everything was just looking awesome. It was a great crowd. Place was rocking, and just kind of slowly slipped away from there. Couldn't really get the offense going. Reagan Beers in foul trouble did not help that. What do you kind of take away from these first two games? Because Texas game was frustrating. Obviously, Texas is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Bona fide national title contender. I think everyone agrees with that. Then you bounce back and you go beat a good Tennessee team who was undefeated yesterday. You had a big lead, almost let it slip away, but you held on and you won. From the first two games, what did you feel like you've learned about this team as the competition's getting tougher? And obviously, again, a really good job to bounce back and kind of, you hate to lose a home game, but then you go steal a road game against a good team. It kind of almost makes up for it in a weird way. How do you kind of feel about where the team is after these first couple SEC games?
I've noticed now that playing these two teams gives you a lot more insight on where Oklahoma is.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like Oklahoma actually could really be really, really good, like a Final Four team if they played well. That's all they have to do. But the one glaring problem that this team has is turnovers and ball security.
Mm-hmm.
And that's simply what it is. Against Texas, they lost that game because they had 27 turnovers. Like, that's exactly why they lost. I mean, they control the ball and do well there. They win that game probably by like 6 or 7 points. Against Tennessee, you talked about it. They lost that lead for a little bit there and almost lost the game because they had 31 turnovers. Like, it's insane the turnovers that they've been having in SEC play. And Peyton Verhulst talked about it. She was like, it's more frustrating because that's something we worked on a lot going into the SEC. Like, we knew we had to have great ball security and ball control, and that's just what they haven't been perfected so far. Now, the good thing is OU shot well against Tennessee, and that's been helping them out a lot. Like, we talked about it with Reagan Beers coming on and being that addition. When she's on the floor, Oklahoma is really good. Now, against Texas, that just wasn't the case because, I don't know, maybe the officials didn't know that it was a rivalry game. Like, they did not let them play hard at all. It was 54 fouls called in that game. And
it's like a 3-hour game.
Yeah, and you had the star players from both teams were sitting throughout the entirety of the second quarter, like Madison Booker, Leah Moore for Texas, and Reagan Beers for OU. Even Sahara Williams had to sit for a while. Like, it's that we didn't get all of it there because of that. So if everybody was playing, maybe it comes out a little bit different. But
sure,
OU had that game in hand. They had that game won, but they just kind of lost it because of ball security and turnovers. And that's the one glaring problem you can have with this team so far. That's pretty much it. Everything else is going really well for OU, and that's why they're still a top 10 team in the country, even after the splitting the games and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. That officiating crew, please never come back to Norman ever again. It was like 2.5 hour game. So many fouls. Had the 12 or 13 minute review.
Yeah, 13 minutes
after the little kerfuffle. That was insane. So yeah,
and then nobody shot free throws after that either. Like,
it was all that just to be like,
you went right back.
Out. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, crazy.
I think you have to be pretty encouraged. I mean, the Texas game was frustrating, but I think there was kind of an element of like, okay, Reagan Beers was in foul trouble the whole game. She barely played. Sahara Williams, same thing. Like, it just kind of felt like they beat themselves in a way. Plus the way that the game was kind of officiated. To bounce back and win yesterday says a lot. And I think you're still feeling very good about what that team is. Yeah. They go to Mississippi State on Thursday, so they'll be in Starkville. So they go back to back on the road, and then they host Texas A&M themselves on Sunday afternoon this coming weekend. So a couple of you seemingly winnable games on paper, and we'll see if they can kind of get things rolling a little bit as some of their big SEC games kind of loom down the road. But encouraging stuff from them, especially yesterday, bouncing back and winning that game.
Yeah, on the road against an undefeated team that just has all the momentum at this point in time, because Tennessee went under. They didn't have a ranked team for a couple of years, after their coaching change and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a team that was very feisty. They didn't go away easy for sure. They were playing really hard, and you saw why they were undefeated. So Oklahoma being able to hold out there was pretty good. So good on them.
For sure. I think that's it. We'll be back later this week with Colin. I don't know what day that show is going to be just yet. Keep your eyes out. He's down in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl. So it's a little bit touch and go when we're going to squeeze that in. So keep an eye out for anything between Wednesday, Thursday range. We'll get that show with Colin. We'll talk about the lates in the portal and maybe some DC search news there as well. We'll keep on chugging. Oklahoma.247sports.com. Make sure to head on over to the website. Obviously, keep up. Become a VIP member. We've got loads of recruiting coverage there, as well as transfer portal, and we'll continue to stay on top of the DC search. Feels like that's winding down. Probably have some resolution there sooner rather than later. So be sure to keep up with us, as that seems to be getting toward its conclusion, the DC search. So we'll have a lot more coverage there. Obviously, basketball continues to roll on as well. So a lot going on over there. Head on over, Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma.247sports.com. That's it for now. For Tom Green, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway. We'll see you guys next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.
See you.